What's going on, headliners? Merry Christmas, everybody. Oh, baby, we've got football basically feels like every single day of the week coming up. We've got a game on Friday, we've got games on Saturday, we've got games on Sunday, we've got a game on Monday. Let's get it, baby. Love all of this football. But it does throw a little bit of a twist into us trying to get all of our information out to you. So we got to move as quickly as possible to make sure that you're ready to roll come the first game of the day, which is on Friday this week. So let's go ahead and jump into it. And let's talk about my top 30 wide receiver rankings here for week 16. First and foremost, Keke Coutee from the Houston Texans. Now, I've been getting some questions about Hansen as teammate as well. And here's the thing. Coutee's a little bit safer for me right now. I'm going to go with him right now over Hansen because with Coutee, he does have a touchdown in 2 straight games at this point. And then also dating back to week 13 when he kind of had to jump in to that not really wide receiver 1 role, but that wide receiver 2 role. He jumps in there, 9 targets, 8 receptions, 141 yards. So he had that big week in week 13 against Indianapolis, and then a couple of smaller weeks since then, but he's got both of those touchdowns after that. So that's why right now I'm going to roll with him. Now, if someone says, hey, I really need to roll with Chad Hansen here, I don't know if I necessarily hate it, but he's just not really getting the type of volume that I would want to have in a guy that I'm going to be playing here in championship week. I mean, the guy's only been in week 13, 14, and 15 this season. That's all he has to show for it. And the last time that he played in the NFL was back in 2017 with the New York Jets. So he doesn't really have that track record that you would want here in championship week. That's why I'm going to go with Keke Coutee this week. And number 29, Russell Gage. Russell Gage absolutely dominating right now with no Julio Jones. And I'm not expecting Julio Jones again this week. Last week without Julio Jones, 10 targets. The week before that, 7 targets. Over the last couple of weeks with no Julio Jones, 17 targets. Russell Gage really feeling him as a nice option this week. Juju Smith, I'm not going to dance on the logo anymore. Schuster, and I'm going to tell you one thing. I really don't care if the guy dances on the logo or not. He's not the reason that they're losing games right now, but he's being used as a scapegoat. Think what you want to. I don't give an ish. Okay, let the guy dance all he wants to. He goes out and he plays hard every single week. Juju Smith-Schuster at number 28 for me. Right now, kind of the number 2 option in terms of safety. There for a while, he probably was the safest option on the team, but it definitely looks to be more like Diontae Johnson again at this point. I had some concerns about Diontae Johnson in terms of him just, kind of staying on the field. But at this point, Pittsburgh's in panic mode. All right, they got to get rolling again. Okay, they can't really lose any more games at this point. So they need to get going. Diontae Johnson, he's one of the best options, if not the best option at wide receiver right now for this team. I don't expect them to pull him off the field anytime soon. And you can see Diontae Johnson up there at number 21. So talking about him and Juju at the same time, I've got Chase Claypool listed in the notable section, so we'll talk about him. But these are the 2 guys. These are the 2 guys kind of going back and forth in terms of who's going to get the targets going up against Indianapolis. Indianapolis playing very well right now, so I still expect them to have to throw the ball quite a bit this week. And with Juju and Diontae, they don't really rely on the deep ball the way Chase Claypool does. That's why I've got these guys higher. At number 27, Emmanuel Sanders. There is no Michael Thomas for the rest of the regular season. That makes Emmanuel Sanders the wide receiver 1 in that offense right now. Since week 12, he has at least 5 receptions in all 3 games. Yards haven't really been there, but you got to remember too, Drew Brees has been missing. So hopefully the targets continue for him. 76 yards with Brees back at quarterback this week. We could get a nice another game against Minnesota. A nice game again for him. Right around those 76 to 90 yards, I believe, and hopefully a touchdown going up against a Minnesota team that definitely can give up some big plays. Tyler Lockett at number 26. Tyler Lockett, man. It's just, it's been a whirlwind season for him. We keep putting him in here hoping that we see some of those performances that we saw at the beginning of the year, but we haven't seen that. So he doesn't have a touchdown since week 11, but when you go into a matchup against the LA Rams, which is going to be tough, but the nice thing about Tyler Lockett is you can move him around, do different things with him in the formation, get him into the slot, move him outside, but he's not going to end up seeing Jalen Ramsey, DK Metcalf well. Okay, so that makes this a little bit better of an opportunity. The last time that they faced the Rams, he did have 66 yards on 5 receptions. Antonio Brown at number 25. Antonio Brown finding the end zone last week for the first time as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. This is going to be an absolute shootout going up against Detroit. Detroit gives up the second most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers give up the most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. 7 targets, 5 receptions, 93 yards, and a touchdown last week. Would not be surprised to find him doing similar things this week. At number 24, Cole Beasley. Woo-hoo-hoo-wee. Cole Beasley's out here winning some people some fantasy football championships with over 100 yards, 3 of his last 5 games. The dude is just out here balling out. He has at least 10 targets in all but 1 game since week 10. The dude's just out here absolutely slaying for us, and that's awesome to see. Going up against New England, expect it. And we'll talk about his teammate, Stefon Diggs, here in a minute. But Gilmore, a huge injury to the secondary there for New England, is going to do marvels for the Bills this week. And number 23, Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper having his first down performance in quite some time last week. Tough to see that, especially when a lot of people were relying on him. Only 10 yards going up against San Francisco, which was, again, tough to see, but the dude's still been very consistent. He had 3 touchdowns in 3 previous games before that. Probably is going to face off against Slay this week in Philadelphia, but Slay has been slayed. Incoming dad joke there. By some wide receivers recently. So still think that the ceiling might be a little bit lower for him this week, but I still think he's going to find himself back towards, the 60 to 80 reception mark or 60 to 80 receiving yards mark, and then hopefully finding the touchdown or finding the end zone with a touchdown once again. Number 22, Cooper Kupp, another guy that's really been disappointing as of late. But the opportunity, especially when you're going up against Seattle, is always there for him. I mean, in his career against Seattle, he averages 8 targets, 4.9 receptions, 58 yards, and 0.4 touchdowns per game. So going up against Seattle, definitely want to see some more of those numbers, especially finding the end zone. Last time they faced Seattle this year, 7 targets, 5 receptions, and 50 yards. Would like to see him get back closer to those 100 yards that we've been seeing. We got to get back. I mean, he only has 5 targets over the last, or 5 targets each of the last 2 games. He did have a touchdown in week 14 against New England, which really helped him out. Last week against the Jets, though, I mean, they ended up losing. And part of my issue with Cooper Kupp last week was, going up against the Jets, get out to a lead. The ceiling's not going to be there, but they were down the whole game. So how come he only got 5 targets last week? Very odd to see that. Deontay Johnson, number 21, already talked about him when I talked about Juju at number 28. Moving on to the top 20 now, DJ Moore at number 20. Dude came back last week with a big week. Glad to see DJ Moore out there balling again, and I got to think we see some more of the same this week. Going up against Washington. Now, maybe not the ceiling of 131 yards that we saw recently, okay? That might be a little bit too much. But here's the thing about DJ Moore. Robbie Anderson is going to be the guy that's on the outside. He's going to get the cornerback 1 coverage, and then they're going to be able to do some things to move DJ Moore around. So I'm not really that worried about him. Kind of did the same thing last week against Green Bay and Jair Alexander. Yeah, Alexander saw Moore a couple of different times, but they were able to kind of get DJ Moore away from him for the most part, and he had 131 yards against Green Bay. I expect some of the same against Washington this week. Jarvis Landry, and apparently, according to my graphics, it's Jarvis Landry. So Mr. Jarvis Landry is what he will be known on this channel from now on. Jarvis Landry, dude's coming on strong here at the end of the season. Another wide receiver option that has really been fantastic. 3 touchdowns in the last 4 games, at least 60 receiving yards, 3 of the last 4 games. Over the last 4 games, 11, 10, 9, and 8 targets. Going up against the New York Jets. Would like to have him a little bit higher, but again, one of the reasons that we have him right here is a fear that if Cleveland is putting it on the New York Jets, which we thought that the Rams might do it last week and they didn't, but I think Cleveland's coming to play this week. I don't think there's a letdown game in that Cleveland team. But that's the reason I've got Jarvis Landry just a little bit lower right now, is because some of that upside disappears as the game goes on. Brandon Cooks at number 18. Now, since Will Fuller's gone down, he's been all right, but he hasn't scored a touchdown. That's been part of the problem. Brandon Cooks was supposed to kind of step in and become that number one guy. And part of the question was, is he going to be that number one guy with no Will Fuller there? I mean, he's been okay, but he hasn't been great either. Going up against Cincinnati, this is a prime game for him to really step up and have one of those big games. And I could definitely see him doing it. At this point, they've got some guys that are playing well enough that you can't just converge right on Brandon Cooks. It gives them a little bit more leeway. Did miss week 14, obviously, but weeks 10, 11, 12, 13, and 15, he's been seeing anywhere between 5 and 8 targets a game. Hopefully, we can get him more along 8 targets this week against Cincinnati. At number 17, Corey Davis, a huge week last week for Corey Davis, bouncing back. A lot of people were concerned with Corey Davis last week after the week before, kind of putting up a little bit of a dud. But Corey Davis coming through last week with 110 yards and a touchdown. Right now, he's kind of alternating games for 100-yard games. Back in week 11, he had 113, then 70, then 182, then 34, then 110. So kind of going back and forth. So if you believe in that, then he's not going to have a 100-yard game this week. However, kind of like what we saw with DJ Moore last week. Robbie Anderson on the outside sometimes sees some of that cornerback one coverage. Talked about that with Carolina. One of the reasons DJ Moore was able to get away from Jair Alexander this week. Now, A.J. Brown, I expect that we see some A.J. Brown going against Jair Alexander. But again, you can move these guys back and forth and do a little bit of maneuvering with them to kind of help get them away. I mean, this is an offense that, runs the ball quite a bit. That does help open up the deep game. Green Bay much better at stopping the pass than what Detroit is, or Cleveland a couple of weeks ago. But 113 yards against Baltimore back in week 11, he can go up against some tougher defenses and do a good job because, again, they run the ball that much, and you've got A.J. Brown pulling that number one coverage. Number 16, Chris Godwin. I mentioned it with A.J. Brown. Look, I mean, this is a Detroit Lions team that's giving up the second most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. And I mentioned it with Marvin Jones right there in front of him. Tampa Bay is giving up the most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers the last 4 weeks. Both of these guys have a prime opportunity to just ball out this week, and I am looking forward to watching this game on Saturday. Hopefully it's the offensive output all of us are hoping for, because there's going to be a lot of people relying on Marvin Jones, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, who we'll see coming up here in a minute, Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski, TJ Hawkinson. Okay, going to be a lot of people looking for them. Heck, even Leonard Fournette is being thrown out there with no Ronald Jones down, of course, DeAndre Swift. So we've got a lot of players in this game that are going to help win some fantasy championships. So let's hope for a lot of points between Tampa and Detroit this week. Marvin Jones is my Manscaped must start of the week. Robert Woods at number 14. Robert Woods, definitely the number one option in that offense right now. And I apologize, I got the wrong name there. Bobby Trees at number 14. Bobby Trees is the guy that's the number one option in that offense right now. Cooper Kupp was a letdown last week, but, Robert Woods with 6 receptions, a touchdown, and 56 yards, not bad. His 32 yards the week before against New England was his worst since week 10. So he has had a few dud performances, but overall, he hasn't been that bad this year. He's been pretty steady. A few games here and there where it's just, he's not going to quite get to 1,000 yards like we would have hoped, but he's back up to 6 touchdowns. His career high was 6 touchdowns back in 2018. He's still got a couple of weeks left to break that. Hopefully, he does. One thing that is down this year, though, his yards per reception, down to 10.4, which would be the worst of his career. So the reason some of those yards aren't helping out right now is because those yards per reception are down. Probably by the time that this season's over with, he will have passed the high of 90 that he saw last season. So again, those yards per reception just a little bit down. If he can have another big game though, or even 2 big games to finish the season, he could still potentially get to 1,000 yards. Robert Woods coming in at number 14. Number 13, Terry McLaurin. He's not the Terry McLaurin that we saw to begin the season. I get it. And yes, if Alex Smith ends up being the starting quarterback this week, which it looks like he will, we go back to being concerned about, what he did against Pittsburgh and San Francisco a couple of weeks ago. Pittsburgh is a tough defense. San Francisco, Richard Sherman is back. So Those are two tough games right there. Seattle, he did have 77 yards against Seattle, 92 against Dallas, 84 against Cincinnati, 95 against Detroit, 115 against the Giants, 90 against the Dallas Cowboys, 74 against the Giants, 118 against Baltimore, 125 against Arizona. So the dude, 83 against Cleveland. So the dude has been super consistent up until week 13 and 14 this season. This week, going up against Carolina, Carolina hasn't been nearly as good at stopping the pass as they were earlier in the season. Number 12, DK Metcalf. I have got him a lot lower in my rankings this week. Probably the lowest he's been for me since the beginning of the season. It's absolutely nothing against DK Metcalf, but the last time he went up against the LA Rams and had to face Jalen Ramsey, 4 targets, 2 receptions, and 28 yards. Don't love that. That is a concern for me this week against the Rams. Over the last 2 seasons, in games in which he faces the Rams, only 3 receptions and 50 yards is his average. So I think that there is going to be a tough week ahead for DK Metcalf, but because the upside is so big on any given play with DK Metcalf, you still have to play him and you still have him towards the top 12 wide receivers. At number 11, Brandon Ayuk. And let me tell you, since Deebo Samuel's been out, this dude has just been blowing up. Maybe not some of the biggest games that you've seen, but he's right around those double-digit targets, 90 receiving yards, and a touchdown every single week. Heck, if you look at it, since week 8, he has 10, 14, 9, 16, and 13 targets. Since week 8, he has 91, 75, 95, 119, and 73 yards. Since week 8, he's got 4 touchdowns. The dude's just absolutely balling out right now. He absolutely deserves to be in the top 12 just based on the volume alone. At number 10, Mike Evans. Basically the same thing as I've mentioned as the other wide receivers in this game. Hopefully it's a shootout. That's what I'm hoping for, is a whole lot of offense in this game. It's nice to see him get back to 100 receiving yards. Only his third 100 receiving yard game of the season and his first since week 4. Didn't score a touchdown, but he's still getting a ton of targets. Since week 10, he's got at least 7 targets in all but 1 game. And he's still scoring touchdowns too. I mean, to begin the season, week 1 through week 5, he had a touchdown in every single game, including 2 in week 3. Then he had another one in week 8, and then he had a stretch between week 10 and week 12 where he had another 4. So the dude is scoring touchdowns. He's still out here balling out. His 11 touchdowns, the second most in any season of his career. His career high from 2014 and 2016 is 12. So yeah, he's not going to get 1,000 receiving yards this year. His yards per reception aren't going to be nearly as big, but the targets are still going to be right around 100 this season. And he's going to have double-digit touchdowns, already does have double-digit touchdowns for the 3rd time in his career. Adam Thielen at number 9, Justin Jefferson at number 8. Both of these guys are still in the top 10, and I told you last week against Chicago, if you got them, you play them. The same thing this week. You got to play them. Yeah, Adam Thielen only scored a touchdown last week. It was really what led him to any type of fantasy relevance. But Justin Jefferson with another big week again. And that's why I've got Jefferson over Thielen the majority of the weeks right now, is because he is kind of the big play guy for them. A.J. Brown at number 7. A.J. Brown might not see a heavy volume week, but the touchdown upside is there for him every single time he steps onto the football field. At number 6, Allen Robinson, you know, when you got Mitchell Trubisky as a quarterback, there is always a little bit of a joke there, but Trubisky's been playing a lot better as of late, and Allen Robinson's still the number 1 target on that team. Yeah, he's not the sexy play, okay? He's not the sexy type of play that maybe A.J. Brown or Justin Jefferson or DeAndre Hopkins or Calvin Ridley or any of these guys are. But he's super consistent. At least 70 receiving yards in every game since week 7 except for 1. The dude's out here still putting up pretty good numbers, and he's got a good matchup against Jacksonville this week. At number 5, DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins, some of that ceiling has come down as of late. Obviously, again, as I mentioned on basically every show so far, that has a lot to do with Kyler Murray's shoulder. However, the last couple of weeks, he's back to it, all right? So week 11, 12, and 13, some of us became concerned. 51, 55, 52 receiving yards. Okay, during that time, hey, that ceiling's coming down. Maybe that arm has something to do with it, whatever that may be. Then boom, we're back to it week 14 and week 15, where he goes for 136 and 169 yards. Right now with 1,324 yards, which leads the league. And he's going to be close, depending on how these last two games go. He's going to be very close to setting a career high in receiving yards. He set that at 1521 back in 2015. Is there a possibility that he gets back there again in 2020? So DeAndre Hopkins, yep, that ceiling had come down, but that dude is back and ready to roll. This week, going up against San Francisco, he's going to get a nice little game against Richard Sherman, but that's okay. DeAndre Hopkins should still take care of business and still be right around 100 receiving yards. Calvin Ridley at number 4. Calvin Ridley, when there's no Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley is a baller. That's why he is so high. 100 yards receiving each of the last 3 games. Double-digit targets each of the last 3 games. Touchdowns in 3 of his last 4 games. And now he gets Kansas City. And you know when you play Kansas City, you're going to be throwing the ball an awful lot. Stephon Diggs all the way up to number 3. Love me some Stephon Diggs this week. No, Stephon Gilmore. Gilmore is out, unfortunately. Never, ever love to see that. But Stephon Diggs is going to get a chance at having an absolute banger of a game this week against New England. His 111 receiving yards leads the league. It's a career high for him. His 1,314 yards is a career high for him as well. The dude, again, just an absolute baller. And with 2 more targets, he'll tie his career high in targets from 2018. One of the best wide receivers in the league. And a good week this week with no Gilmore across from him. Tyreek Hill at number 2. Devontae Adams at number 1. There's really nothing to say about these guys. You own them. You got them in the lineup. They are absolute ballers. They are the top 2 wide receivers every single week. Let's hop on over to our notable players, Keenan Allen, Julio Jones. Both of these guys kind of game time decisions still at this point. We're not really sure whether or not they will play, and if they do, they could end up being hampered. Allen Lazard and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Both of these guys are good plays this week, as well as Curtis Samuel and Chase Claypool. Now, actually, like in the middle of recording this show, I get a little notification that pops up on my phone. And sometimes this is just how it goes. All right. We're in the middle of recording a show. We get a notification on the phone and we got to change some things up. So let's pop Nelson Aguilar's name in there instead of Curtis Samuel, because I think Nelson Aguilar is somebody that we got to take a little bit closer look at than Samuel this week. So Lazard and Valdes-Scantling, both of these guys are good, safe targets this week. Chase Claypool, Eric Ebron will play, so that makes Claypool just a little bit riskier for me. Is Ben Roethlisberger 100%? Is he dealing with some soreness? Now playing through an entire season since that surgery, so that makes Chase Claypool just a little bit more riskier for me. Nelson Aguilar, the reason that we're throwing Nelson Aguilar back in here is because he is getting Derek Carr back, it looks like. So just coming across my phone as I'm recording this, that Derek Carr seems to be the starting quarterback this week. So now Nelson Aguilar will be a start for me this week. He was a sit because it looked like Marcus Mariota was going to end up being the guy when I started recording this. And when I did my start and sits earlier in the week, and then now all of a sudden getting this notification, we got to get Nelson Aguilar back into the start column, and he's going to be just around that top 30 for me this week. Well, there you go. You got it, Headliner Nation, my top 30 wide receivers for week 16. Get your lineup set and ready to roll. Of course, as always, make sure you hit the like button on the video. Leave a comment down below if you've got any questions, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and become a part of Headliner Nation today. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, the draft guide is available for pre-order. So if you go to thefantasyheadliners.com, you can pre-order your 2021 draft guide today. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there. Enjoy your Christmas, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.